Hi, I'm Cicely Joseph, and I'm the Director of Corporate Responsibility at Symantec. Today the topic is green IT, and our special guest is Jose Iglesias, who's going to talk to us a little bit about green IT at Symantec. So welcome, Jose.
Well, thanks, Cecily. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to be able to talk about green IT being such an important topic in the industry today.
How would you define green IT in today's landscape?
Well, so the whole notion of green IT is really all around how to be able to save energy by the customer, focusing on IT. So being able to look at all the IT-related equipment and being able to say, okay, before I was consuming this amount of energy, now I want to be able to consume this much less. The other aspect of green IT gets all into being able to get rid of it responsibly. I mean, most of the IT material, and people forget about this oftentimes, is that it's made up of a lot of toxic materials. And so you need to be able to dispose of them in a ecologically responsible manner.
Some people say that there is an energy crisis in the data center. I mean, would you agree with that? Do you think there is?
Absolutely. I mean, there was a study that was done by CSC, a company in the UK, that basically said if you combine all the energy consumed by IT, it amounts to 2% of the world's energy production. That's huge. That's about the equivalent to all the energy consumed by the country of the Netherlands. When you add to that the amount of energy that it took to build the IT equipment, it doubles the amount of energy worldwide consumed to basically 4%. Now, that doesn't include things like the energy required to dispose of the assets once you're finished with them. Additionally, there's all the other componentry that comes along with it. In other words, building the data center to house the equipment and all of that. There was a recent study that was just completed by McKinsey that basically said that the amount of energy consumed by IT is going to double in the next 3 to 5 years. That's also supported by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency that forecasts that the energy consumed by IT will double in the next 5 years.
So, Jose, let me interrupt you there and ask you a question. Why now? I mean, why do we see that happening now? Why is the crisis you describe happening today? Did we see the same problem, say, 5 years ago?
Right. No, that's a really good question, and there's actually multiple facets to the answer to that. So one facet really revolves around what I like to call the miniaturization of hardware. And so what used to take the size of a refrigerator for a server before, now you can pack the same compute capability into a pizza box sized blade. So that means when you start putting in all these pizza boxes in the same volume of space that the refrigerator used to take up before, then all of a sudden the amount of energy consumption, both electricity and cooling, goes up tremendously. So you get into this environment that says your kilowatts of energy and the cooling for this physical space goes up. Same things happen with multi-core processors. It used to be that you would have a single core from the chip manufacturers, and they would use up so much energy. Now, when you go to multi-cores, the chips are getting denser. The amount of modules and chips you can put in the same planar keeps going up. The size of the circuits keeps increasing, so the amount of energy being consumed plus the heat dissipating that needs to be dissipated keeps increasing. Similarly, disk drives. It used to be that a disk drive was about 5 1/4 inch diameter. Now a typical disk drive is anywhere from 2.5 to 1.8 inch in diameter. That smaller disk drive uses much less power, but when you think about how many more of those you can pack in the same volume of space that you used to be able to put a 5 1/4 inch drive into, it's much higher. So then that means you use up that much more electricity and cooling for the same volume of space. So that's one facet. The amount of equivalent electricity and cooling for the same volume of space has gotten much more. That affects the data center. The reason it affects the data center is very simple. It's like my house. My house has a certain amount of capacity for electricity used inside the house. That means that if I loaded up a particular circuit too much, then I trip the circuit breaker. So either I have to go through an expensive process of having the local utility provider bring in more power to my house, or I have to live without. And the same thing's happening to the data center. You have to be able to go in and increase either the amount of power, because you may have the space available, but you may not have the power to be able to install more equipment. The other dynamic that's happening, it gets into the cost of electricity when you can get it. And I'll explain both of them separately. One of the big phenomena that characterized last year was the massive spike in the price of oil that was being sold in the spot market. Now, that impacted the cost of electricity, but only to a certain extent. In most countries around the world, the cost of electricity actually is regulated by the government, and so they have built in certain rate increase that's reflective either by the price of oil going up or just the cost of generating electricity going up. In many places in North America, Western Europe, Japan, and others, the rates have gone up anywhere from 10% to over 30% on a year-by-year basis. So remember I told you that the cost of electricity is the second largest operational expense for IT. If you were paying X amount last year, now you're going to be paying 30% more than you did last year. The other part to it is, in some parts of the world, like for example in South Africa, or even this part of London that's called Canary Wharf, or the city of Amsterdam, there's no more power. For example, in Johannesburg, South Africa, there's no more power, and the lead time to build a new power plant is measured in years. So that means that they have rolling blackouts that are happening throughout the whole city and suburbs of Johannesburg. So that means if you have a data center there and you want to increase the electric consumption, you have to find in some other way, like build your own generating capability. So it's kind of been this perfect storm from a supply and cost perspective that's hit us right now.
So you've done a really good job of explaining what the problem, I think, is in the data center. What impact are we seeing outside of the data center? How does IT and green IT play a role outside of the data center?
Right. One of the things that characterizes the use of electricity by IT equipment is the fact that even though the data center is the single biggest user of one entity, the other aspect to it is that nearly 40% of the electricity consumed by IT-related equipment actually happens outside the data center. Now, why is that? I mean, you compare a laptop or a desktop to a big server. Well, the big server draws a lot more power, but the difference is the quantity. So, like for example, let's take Symantec as case in point. Symantec, we have 18,000 employees. We have over 30,000 desktop and laptops. I mean, we're a software development company, so that means a lot of our developers have at least two endpoints. You know, in many cases, they'll have one for doing their code development on a Unix-based platform, and then they'll have an Office-based machine for being able to do the Office-level work. So that's why we have many more endpoints than we have employees. We're not atypical. That's actually fairly common out in the industry.
What about studies and work that Symantec's done around this area? I've heard that recently Symantec did do a study around energy efficiency. Could you elaborate a little bit about the findings of that study?
Yes. So there were actually two relevant data points that your viewers should be aware of. One of them is we conducted the second pass at the data center report. And in there, we basically went out and visited and talked with over 1,600 enterprise customers throughout the world. They were scattered over 21 countries around the world, so it's a fairly comprehensive study. What came back was, okay, the world is in a really bad economic shape right now, and the number one concern that came from the respondents was that IT was being asked to do more with less. No surprise there. But when you start asking them, okay, so what are the key initiatives that IT is tackling? The first one is developing new applications for their businesses. That makes a lot of sense. But then the second one is tackling this whole green issue. And they were tackling it one of three ways. The first one was to drive down cost. The second one was to use less equipment, and then the third was because of a sense of responsibility to the community that they were a part of. So they were approaching it from a very holistic point of view to look at all the different facets of it. So anyway, I would encourage your viewers to go into our Symantec.com website and pull down the report. It's actually very, very interesting. The other piece of work that we've done was basically using our own products. And so the Symantec IT team actually published a report with all the work that they had done around green. And that's a very interesting report that we can go into more detail later.
What are you finding, or how would you explain how Symantec's offerings and green IT is important to our customers?
Right. That's a question I get asked all the time. So because most likely, people say, okay, saving energy, green software, it doesn't make sense, and that's a very typical reaction that I'll get. And first of all, the reason why that Symantec brings a lot of value to the table from a green perspective is that we're actually tackling the whole energy consumption problem at the core, which is being able to do the same amount of work with less equipment than what you needed before. We do that by still being able to keep the same service level agreement that IT has with their internal customers. So one of the things that we do as part of that is let me give an example, is we have a great product offering called VCS1, or Veritas Cluster Server 1. Most people run their applications in a high availability environment, which means that you have your application running on one server, and then then you have one standby server in case your main application server fails. So you have this one-to-one association from a high availability perspective. Why have one standby server sitting there all the time just waiting for the main one to fail? The hardware teams have done a phenomenal job at being able to make their hardware much more robust and reliable than they used to be 5 years ago. So the VCS1 team has come up with this scheme where you can actually go in and do what's called N-to-1. So rather than having 5 clusters, which equals 10 machines, then reduce that down to 6, 5 active servers, and then have one standby server. So you can reduce it from 10 to 6. So that's a good example of going after the core issue. Another area where we really go after the core issue is around data. Data is one of the major drivers for people needing to use more storage. We have a lot of different technologies that can be used very effectively to not only reduce the amount of data that customers keep, but also to make the storage that you store your data into much more effective. So for example, we have a set of products that offer this capability called deduplication. Why keep the same data file many times over? Why not keep one unique instance of it and then put pointers from what we have to that unique instance. That can save you a significant amount, and in fact, the teams have measured that you can save anywhere from like 440 to 1 savings up to like 300 plus to 1 savings. From the storage side, we actually have really excellent technology to be able to not only discover how your storage is being used, so that you can go in and identify unallocated storage or storage that is not being used very effectively, all the way to making sure that you can use different types of storage, because you don't need to have the best performance for all your data all the time. You can segregate your data and have this type of data reside in this type of storage, and this other type of data reside on this other type of storage. Each one of the different storage devices has a different energy profile, and by the way, also a different dollars per gigabyte profile. So we offer the tools to be able to take advantage of that, and at the same time save a lot of energy. The third facet that we can help the drive down energy consumption is around power management. And as I told you earlier, nearly 40% of the energy being consumed by IT-related equipment happens outside the data center, out in those desktops and laptops and the like. So we have a set of capabilities in our endpoint power management products that can go in and be able to put a central set policy by IT that can then be rippled out to all the endpoints. And so after a certain level of inactivity, you can go in and have the monitor be turned off or eventually hibernate the machine. You can also do some really interesting things like at a specified time, bring them up again, so that if you need to push out new antivirus definitions or backup or new applications or patches or all that other stuff, you can wake them up and then put them back to sleep again.
Great. Jose, do you have any examples of customers who are currently using our technology to be more green or save energy that you could share with us today?
Oh, you bet. So actually, so Symantec IT is one big internal customer, and they are a big user of our products, and we can go into detail for what kind of value they've seen it. But one of our most exciting customers that they've actually implemented the technology that we have to save a lot of energy is Renault F1. Most people will think about Renault F1 as the car racing people, but they won't think about the fact that there's actually a significant amount of IT behind it. But there is. Renault F1 is one of the leading edge customers in terms of using IT to do everything from designing new cars where they simulate, for example, a new race car in a computer generated wind tunnel. That way they can minimize how many different prototypes they have to build before they actually get their Formula One car ready to hit the tracks. All the way to being able to model different kinds of fuels and different kind of fuel mixes and all of that. They use a number of our Symantec technologies, and they've implemented a number of them to be able to drive down cost. One of the unique things about the European environment where Renault F1 is located is the fact that not only are they worrying about things like cost and the environment, all of that, but also they have to also follow it because of legislation by the European Union as well as by the UK government. So Renault F1 has done a phenomenal job of increasing the amount of capabilities that IT offers their internal customers for designing cars and fuel formulations and the like. But also they've been able to drop down the amount of energy that they use because they implemented products from Symantec, like, for example, the VCS1 example that I gave you earlier.
Great. You actually touched on an interesting topic.
What is that, the race car?
That, but also just globally, what are you seeing as you go around as far as legislation? And maybe you could talk a little bit about how that's impacting green IT or what you might see happening in the future.
Sure. That's a great question. Actually, it's a question that's very near and dear to me right now. When you look at the world, certain parts of the world, and Europe probably has been in the forefront of this, has taken a very proactive approach to drive down energy consumption. Part of it is because they also happen to have the most expensive energy rates in the world. And so they've done this through a set of different approaches. So like, for example, in the European Union, there's a commission in Brussels that actually has put together what they call the Code of Conduct for data centers, which is basically a set of guidelines for customers in the EU to follow to drive down energy consumption. Certain countries within the EU, like for example the UK, they've actually have taken that a couple of steps further. So like for example, the UK issued the ICT directive for the UK government, which means it was a very prescriptive set of guidelines for Her Majesty's government's data centers and what they should do and what type of actions should they take effect to drive down energy usage and less renewable resource usage. So in that ICT directive, it actually goes in and talks about things like, extending the life of equipment being used, implementing technologies that offer deduplication and endpoint power management and the like. So that's Europe. And other countries in Europe have also implemented different kinds of legislation. Like, for example, in Scandinavia, the Scandinavian countries will require that a vendor that's fulfilling a request for a quote or request for information actually fill out a set of questions about what are their internal practices from a corporate responsibility and energy usage and the like. But that's Europe. Australia actually is also embarked on an effort to drive down energy usage through the use of legislation. When their new prime minister took over at the end of 2007, the very first thing that he did, like within hours of taking office, was he committed Australia to sign the Kyoto Protocol. And so that kicked off a number of activities that actually are being talked about right now in Canberra about what directions should the Australian government do to reduce its carbon footprint and its energy consumption across the whole country. The U.S. has been it's been an interesting environment. At the state level, there actually has been a number of activities that certain states have undertaken. California is the most notable one. Also, in the Northeast states, actually implemented a carbon cap and trade implementation that embodies 20 states, where they can go in and trade carbon offsets to meet the caps that were put in place as part of this 20-state carbon cap. The power companies within the United States, either through incentives by the local governments or out of their own initiative, also are offering rebates. So if a company goes in, for example, and installs endpoint power management, and they happen to sit within the power that Pacific Gas Electric supplies, then they can go in and submit a request to get a $15 per endpoint rebate from PG&E. And there are similar types of rebates in Southern California and Arizona, Texas, and as well as some provinces in Canada.
You've talked a little bit about what green IT is, some of the solutions that Symantec offers to address the issue, what we're seeing some of our customers do. and how they integrate this, and also what you're seeing on a global scale from a legislative perspective. Given today's economy and the fact that so many of our customers are challenged in making decisions around cost and spending money and trying to save money, how do we really go out and convince our customers that they need to invest in these kinds of solutions in order to perhaps save money down the road? How do you tell that story or engage customers in this discussion?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. The key finding that came out of the data center report is the fact that IT is being asked to do more with less. IT still needs to keep the lights running and the operation humming as part of the service that they provide to their company. But nevertheless, they need to implement new technologies to make sure that they stay competitive and keep the level of capability up to par. So, as I told you earlier, energy cost is the second largest operational expense that IT has. Whether IT pays for that directly, in other words, they pay the electric bill for the data center directly, or whether it gets cross-charged, allocated by the facilities guy that may pay the bill but may cross-allocate it over to IT, IT needs to worry about it. And so if we can go in and demonstrate to the customer how much money they can save from an energy perspective by implementing this Symantec technology to do X, Y, Z, then we can perform an ROI. We can do a return on investment on that. In many cases, the customer already has the base product, and so it may be as simple as turning on a feature or turning on a capability of the product that they already have installed. But we developed an ROI calculator that Symantec is more than happy to sit down with the customers to say, okay, look, if you do this and this and this, then we can save you this much money, which then we can then calculate an ROI. Oftentimes, you can do that ROI within 12 months. And so it becomes an easy discussion then to say, okay, by doing this, we can save you some money, and that will go positive within the year.
So is this ROI tool available globally? I mean, can any of our sales team use this around the world?
Yeah, great question. So one of the things is, electricity rates are different everywhere. Not only within the different states of the U.S., but you go to other countries like Germany, Italy, the UK, Australia, wherever the energy rates vary from country to country. And the reason is because the electricity is generated through different means, whether it's nuclear, wind, power, solar, hydroelectric, coal, whatever. And so being able to adapt the model so that you can reflect what the local conditions are is one of the key design aspects of the ROI model. Additionally, we've come up with a version of the ROI model that we can give to our business partners so that they can do the same thing, talking to our mutual customers. So they can go in and sit down with their customers and say, okay, if you do this and this and this, this is the how much money you can save, and then we can then do an ROI based on that.
Okay, so how can...
And by the way, we have different language capability on the tool too. So if you want to use the Japanese version of the tool, we can do that, German version, and we're even designing the British proper English version.
Could you share with our customers and partners a little bit of information about where they can learn about Symantec's green IT solutions and offerings?
Certainly, that's a great question. So what we've done is as part of the Symantec.com website, you can actually go into the search engine that you find in the upper right-hand block of the website and type in Green IT. In there, then it will lead you to the website that has all the information around what is Symantec's commitment to green IT, what are the capabilities that we have that can help drive down your energy usage, and you can figure out what are the different aspects of the whole environment that Symantec has that we can help you drive down your energy consumption.
Thank you, Jose. We've heard some great information today about Symantec's green IT strategy and the solutions and services that are available to its customers and partners around green IT and helping them be more energy efficient. Thank you, Jose, very much for coming today and sharing Symantec strategy with us. It's very much appreciated, and we learned a lot.
Well, thank you very much, Cecily. It was a real pleasure to be here and talk with you about green IT and Symantec's capabilities towards helping drive down energy usage.
Thank you.